All right, so take 3 on recording this video. How's it going, everyone? It's been a minute since I uploaded video on this channel, not for lack of trying, but yeah, I'm back recording for this again. I'm going to talk a little bit about why up ahead, but trying to get up this hill first. I'm here on the AT in the Hudson Valley on Anthony's Nose, which is a favorite little hike of mine because of the view at the top. So we'll get a little bit further up and I'll talk a little bit more. So this is actually my 3rd time recording this video. The first time was so outdated that by the time that I actually got around to editing it after I shot it, all the information that I had in it was just not relevant anymore, completely out of date with what I was doing. The second time was like a week ago, but 2 things happened. A, I underestimated how close to the highway the trail was, and half of the video you just can't hear me at all in. And B, I slipped on some ice about halfway through and got really kind of angry and not focused the second half of the video. So hopefully this time it works out a little bit better. It's still icy, but I actually have on my micro spikes. So this is actually great training for the Sierra Nevada this year. So it's not coming out very well in video, but I have a micro spike on there dug into the ice, and my knee is, pulling back with all the force I have and barely getting it to move, which is good to know. These spikes are a few years old, so this was my test run before my big plans for this year. I'm glad to see that they're working just fine. All right, so I'm up on top of what's basically the primary ascent of this hike. Comes up the hill from down there. And then behind me, you can see where I'm going. That's the main ascent up to Anthony's Nose, which is the target destination for the day. When we get there, I have a drink of water. We'll talk a little bit more about what's going on, what's in the future, what you're gonna see out of this channel. All right, see you in a sec. So stuff never comes out quite as steep on video as it is in person, but this is making me really glad I wore my spikes today, because this is just essentially a straight up wall of ice and slush. So I would not be able to climb this in under my normal power. One thing that I'm not a huge fan of on this trail, I'm always continually shocked to discover, which is kind of a shame on me situation, is I always remember this trail being very flat once you get up the primary incline. Maybe 1 or 2 small up and downs, but no, it's actually still very, very hilly up here. I'm coming up on the last one here though, so in a minute we'll get to the view that it's been about, which is, in my opinion, it's always worth the effort to get up here for it, especially on a day like today when I am quite literally the only one up here. Or at least at the parking lot I used, that was the only car there. There might have been someone who took another way up ahead. All right, so welcome to Anthony's Nose. Very scenic view behind me. For those of you who don't know, this is where the Appalachian Trail crosses the Hudson River. It doesn't come directly here, it's about half a mile off the trail. But in my opinion, it's one of the best views you can get, even remotely close to the AT. It's always worth the trip up here. I mean, cameras never do justice here, but you have Bear Mountain in the background. If you look back that way, you can see the city from here. It's always fantastic. It's one of the best views in the Hudson Valley in general. Highly recommend coming up here. Just before I forget to talk about one of the pieces of gear that I've been testing today are these new Black Diamond Pursuit poles. My last set of poles, which were also a set of Black Diamonds, I forget the exact model, were great poles, but they kept slipping from the settings I needed them at. These ones have gone the whole way up this mountain supporting my weight. They're working out great. I'm really glad I bought them. And just sort of adding on to it, here I have my fully loaded pack. This was a fully loaded training hike. Yeah, I've got basically everything in there that I'm gonna have with me. Slightly different water bottles. I don't have my clothes fully loaded. There's no food in there, but yeah, it's been working out great so far. So if you actually look across the way there, across the river, that's Bear Mountain State Park. otherwise known as the place where the Appalachian Trail passes through a zoo. You can't really see it from here. It's kind of blocked behind some trees and some hills right where the camera's pointing right there. But the reason why I come up here to Anthony's Nose a lot versus going and hiking Bear Mountain, which is the mountain you can see right there, is because even though it's empty today, you never know when that park is just going to be absolutely packed. You know, the last time I went over there, it was on, you know, a Wednesday in September, and it was 100% full. I had to wait in a line to hike down the mountain. So in general nowadays, even if it seems like the park's going to be empty, I come up here anyways, because even if the park is empty, I know this one's going to be empty, and I don't have to risk competing with the crowds for space on the trail. So the nice thing about shooting up on scenic vistas like this is that the wind is always coming in and ruining my shots. But I mentioned earlier that this is a training hike. You might be wondering, what am I training for? Probably not, because if you're watching this video, you A, either know me somewhere along the way in real life, B, follow me on Instagram, or C, you read my blogs. So this is probably not coming as a shock to anyone, but I am hiking the Pacific Crest Trail this year, which I am super excited. And in case you're not too familiar with what the Pacific Crest Trail actually is, it is essentially a long distance, ultra long distance, depending on who you ask, hiking trail that runs from the Mexican border right near San Diego to the Canadian border in central eastern Washington. It's about 2,650 miles long. It's essentially the West Coast equivalent to the Appalachian Trail. One of the American Triple Crown of hiking, and a trail that I have been super excited to tick off my list for ever since I hiked the Appalachian Trail, basically. But I have not gotten the chance up until now for a variety of reasons, but I also got super lucky to be able to hike it this year. And I'll go into a little bit of why that is on the way down. I also have a blog post up on the trek. You can look me up by name, George or Christina, that goes into a little bit further detail on this. So essentially, the day I finished my Appalachian Trail through hike, I knew I was not going to be a one and done through hiker. I just didn't know sort of what forms the next steps were going to take for me. You know, I wanted to do another ultra long distance one like the AT, but I didn't know if I'd have the time and such in the future. I had the rest of college looming down on me, and, you know, I was expecting some kind of grad school after that. So, you know, it never really occurred to me, you know, when, where, how I'd be doing another through hike. It's just something that I wanted to do. So on the second anniversary of my AT through hike, or starting it rather, it was basically coming up to spring break at my college. I didn't really have solid plans for anything, so I was like, hey, you know what? I'll go section hike Georgia with the Nobo Bubble. You know, have some nostalgia, relive the good old days. You know, why not? And I went out and did it, and even though that section hike really ended in disaster for me, you know, my trusty sleeping pad, which had lasted me basically the second half of the AT, popped my second night out and kind of ruined the experience. It kind of relit that fire in me to do that kind of long distance hike, that you know, that experience of waking up in the morning and there's nothing to do but hike further north. So in the aftermath of that, I knew immediately, all right, I want to do this again. I want to do it soon. So when's the next time I can do that? And that ended up being this year. I knew I wasn't going to dive straight into grad school right after college. You know, I didn't really want to just dive straight into the rest of my life like that. And B, you know, I wanted to focus on my senior year of school. I didn't want to get bogged down in applications and taking tests and that sort of thing. So I knew I was going to have time this year. And the immediate place my mind drew was not the PCT. It's actually the Eastern Continental Trail, which is basically the Appalachian Trail plus the Florida Trail and the Key West Trail. So you get the whole length of the American East Coast, and then the International Appalachian Trail which goes up into Canada and in particular Newfoundland. But so as it became clear that I wasn't going to have the time or the money to do the Eastern Continental Trail, you know, it takes the better part of a year if you're moving fast. It's a lot of money. It's also just not that interesting of a trail. The parts of it that I haven't done down in Florida or up in Canada have a lot of road walking and that sort of thing, which isn't my cup of tea. I have all the respect to people who do those trails, but it's not what I was interested in for what I'm doing this year. So with that off the table, my brain immediately went, okay, what's the hike that I know most of my class of AT class of 2021 compatriots did for their second through hike, the Pacific Crest Trail. So the problem was then, in my mind at least, I have a certain idea of what I want a through hike to look like. I'm not going to call myself a purist by any means of the word. Anyone who's hiked with me knows that that is not the case with me at all. But I wanted to have a trail where I'd have to do the minimum amount of flip-flopping around it due to factors that I can't control, you know. And namely on the Pacific Crest Trail, that's, you know, wildfire and snowpack in the Sierra Nevada. The snowpack is a particularly relevant one to this conversation. And so essentially it worked down to two factors, right? First of all, I needed a permit for the Pacific Crest Trail. It's essentially a unified permit for the whole trail. There's ways to do it without it, but they get increasingly complicated and hard to manage, which I didn't really want to deal with. You know, there's other trails out there that are easier in that regard. So I needed the universal permit on a very narrow range of days because in order to do this properly, I had to get back in time for grad school. So the permit timing was the first big hurdle I had to jump through. Permit release day comes around for PCT, permit release day 1, if you're familiar with the process. I get super lucky. I luck out. I get the best time slot I think anyone realistically is going to get. I get my fair pick of the days. I get the exact day I want. Huge. That's amazing. So that brings me to the second hurdle. We've already talked about it, the snowpack. Essentially, I needed it to be a lower year in terms of snow buildup in the Sierra Nevada. This was because I have no problem doing snow, but, you know, because of how early-ish my start date has to be, I didn't want to be, you know, trudging my way post-holing through 8 feet of pack the whole way through. You know, a lot of people in those situations tend to skip around, and I know that if I skip the section, I'm probably never going to have the time to go back out west and redo it. So I wanted to avoid that as much as possible. And, you know, I've been tracking the snow every few days, and it's looking like a lower snow year in the southern Sierra. So we got incredibly lucky that, you know, first try, both of those worked out. I met a gentleman on the Appalachian Trail who had tried for essentially 5 years to get a perfect PCT year and never got it. And I think I've somehow gotten it on the first try. I'm entering my final month of prep here, so I'm doing a bunch of full weighted training hikes. You know, just as the time allows. I'm still working and everything for another 2 weeks or so, and then I've got some college visits to go on for law school and whatnot. But entering the final stretch here, and I'm just super excited to hit the trail, and I'm super excited for everyone to kind of follow along with me from home. So, you know, hopefully I stick with the videos this time. If you know about my Appalachian Trail through hike, it didn't go so well when I tried to do that, or do this vlog thing. But this time I'm hoping I stick with it a little better. I'm a little bit more mature. I'm a little bit more prepared for the hike I'm undertaking. So I think this time it should hopefully work out. But until the next time I record, thank you for watching, and I hope to see you on the next video.